So let me just point to one piece that you just mentioned and see if we can double click on it. When you say we don't have a primary investment mentality, more of an operator's mentality, what do you think that looks like in practice? How do you behave differently than some of your peers that might be more investment oriented in their approach?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that there's definitely an intellectual pursuit to what we do, but a lot of the businesses we're buying, I mean, these are blue collar owners. I mean, they got into the business because, you know, they loved construction or they love manufacturing, right? And they worked their way up from the assembly line. You know, these are not, you know, philosopher kings. These are people who, you know, this is the first time I've been out of blue jeans in, I don't know, 2 months. You know, even if we're in, you know, big city, I mean, we're typically dressing down because we're buying businesses that are, for the most part, run by practitioners. And so the way we relate to them is we can relate to them not as saying, hey, we know about this great bond strategy, or we can, you know, talk to you about alpha versus beta and, you know, these type of terminology. They have no idea what we're talking about. We talk to them in terms of like, hey, how are you incentivizing your sales team, right? Like, how are we thinking about, you know, optimizing the plant for production, those types of things. And so when we think about the day-to-day, what we really try to be excellent at, it's the investing, the sort of the numbers and the score takes care of itself. It's all about the people and all about the operations of the business, and that's how the returns get produced.
Great. So one of my favorite interviewers out there is Tyler Cowen, an economist out of George Mason. And one of the favorite questions that he tees up for people is to ask about their unique production function. So what it is that they do that allows them to do what they do at the highest level. Might be how they read, how they think, who they surround themselves with. So I'm curious, as we hop into your stories for each of you, how would you explain your own unique production function? Scott, why don't you kick us off on this one?
I guess I would start off saying, like, I'm not sure how unique it is. I can tell you what, like, how I think we basically we're starting with this pool of capital, which is our primary input. We have a team that manages that capital. We probably have a small bit of intellectual property. We have a brand. You know, we're a good cause. People generally like that. And ultimately, we're trying to generate, you know, great long-term returns with all those inputs. Now, how do we do that? I would say, like, we go out and find external partners like Brent, who we think are well aligned with us, an institution, and view the world in a similar way and can add value to our portfolio over super long periods of time. I would say, you know, as it approaches to direct investments, is like, how do you maximize that production function, and how do you maximize our relationship with external partners like permanent equity? And typically that's through some form of direct investments where we work super closely with those partners. We understand what they're doing. We understand what in their portfolio, the process that led to those investments. And when we find stuff that our partners are super excited about, you know, we'll start doing our own work on that. And then ultimately, if we can, we'll try and insert ourselves into the cap table, typically in partnership with that external partner.
So let me push on this, because I love that framing, and a lot of it's around the unique production function of the institution, the fund that you run. What about you as Scott? What is it that you do uniquely that fuels that production function?
You know, I try and spend the vast majority of my time is just operating as another member of the investment staff. Now, obviously, I have other responsibilities to the university and the board, but typically that's less than 5-10% of my time. And I'm doing the same sort of analysis and work that the rest of the team is. We're on calls. If we go out to Columbia to meet with Brent and his team, I'm just another person there, and I may not even be leading the meeting. It may be whoever the head on that investment is who's put together their kind of, hey, here are the big high points we want to hit. And I think that's super important, just the way we take a team approach, and we're all generalists. For me to be involved early in the process, I think, you know, it's disheartening if you have kind of this gatekeeper who sits at the top of the portfolio and the team is out there doing all this work, comes back and says, hey, we think this is a great investment. And I'm like, well, we're not investing in a private equity firm in Columbia, Missouri. That's just a non-starter. I don't know who brought that. Who thought that was going to be?
We'll find them later.
Yeah.
We'll find them later.
Anyway, so, you know, that's really how I spend my time.
Good, I like that. So Brent, same question. When it comes to either the firm's unique production function and, I should say, your unique production function, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, in private equity, I mean, for the most part, we're selling money. I mean, that's at least how the industry looks at it. And I actually think that a lot of what makes Scott, I mean, let me actually say a few things about WashU, because, I mean, we talked to 30 of the top 50 endowments in the country during our last fundraise, right? And WashU clearly stood out of the crowd in a number of ways, but what was attractive to us about it was they shared a similar vision for sort of how you go about doing business. And what I would say is like a high degree of intellectual honesty and humility was like an incredibly refreshing thing. And a lot of endowments, the conversations we had where we know what's awesome, we're amazing. We're an incredible team. We're so smart. Do you see all our degrees? Do you see, it's like this very.
It doesn't sound like universities at all.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I had no idea. The WashU team was like, I think we talked about fishing for, it's funny as that sounds, like we're like real people, and it was like real relationships that we had. And the questions they asked in such a way that it wasn't presupposing the answer. And I think that's what a lot of it makes us successful. What we do is we go in with humility and with respect and treating people as people, not as a means to an end, but as the end in themselves. And people can just tell, right? I mean, you can say all the right words, but if you say it with sort of disdain and condescension, people can tell, And I think that's what, I admire so much about what they do, and we try to do a lot of that at our shop is just, how do you relate to people? And at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing. We want to raise healthy families. We want to have enjoyable lives. Like, we're all trying to, achieve the same end. We're trying to shoot the lights out in terms of returns. Make no mistake about it. We're people-centric, but we believe that is by far the best way to produce long-term returns. And I can tell you, the reason why they shot the lights out is because they have the best relationships. They have the best relationships because, I'll tell you a little side story. I called Scott in the depth of COVID, and I said, Scott, we're fine, I think. We've got, a couple of years of runway, but I'm starting to worry if, I can create a scenario where all this happens. And he said, literally, stop. We've got your back, whatever you guys need. We're there with you for the long term. You have no idea how much that meant to me and how it enabled our team and gave us the confidence to just charge forward, and it was a huge boost for us, right? We try to do that same thing for our businesses, which aligns with us and aligns with our investors, right? How we're going to produce great long-term returns is through relationships. How you produce great relationships is actually caring about people.